I'm a 54-year-old woman that is childless, and that was not initially by choice. I want to share my story, and I want this to be my intention is for this to be support and of service to any woman who is in that place, likely in her mid to late 40s, and maybe even in your early 50s, and have not reconciled the idea that you did not get to have a child. I always thought I was gonna have a baby. I always thought I was gonna have a family. I mean, I had that fantasy for sure, that dream. And when I was growing up, I had a lot of food, body dysmorphia. I had a lot of issues in that regard. And that had me very nervous about the way my body would change and how I would feel. I was never diagnosed, but I do remember having a friend in high school who got hospitalized for what she went through. And I remember feeling like I needed support. The point is that that kept me for a long time not having a child because I felt really I didn't want that. I didn't want that. I didn't want my child, my unborn child, to feel the energy of the self-loathing that I felt. And it's been a while since this all happened, but I remember that also how I was relating to actually having a child was really wanting my life to look a certain way. I really wanted to be a different parent. I wanted my child to have I had a lot of judgment that how I was relating with myself and all the things that the depression and all these things that I was struggling with. I didn't want my child to have that. I wanted to position myself to be in a better place, to be able to create something different. And so those fears of wanting to get it right and wanting to have an optimal situation and also just, I had a boyfriend from the time I was like 14 and a half until I was married and divorced, which was in my early to mid 30s. And then after that, I really was not in a long-term relationship for a very long time. So I had a lot of daddy issues as well. And it was just I never thought that I wouldn't have a baby. And for most of my 40s, I was in deep, deep sadness, grief, and on many occasions despair. Like on the floor in fetal position, there were several of those experiences. And sometimes it would get triggered by something I would see that would be really emotional, and it would support me on some level and having that emotional release. But I think also for me, I have related and a coping skill that I've had is to be a dreamer, and I never thought it wouldn't happen. So when I was in my late 30s, it was offered to me by a doctor that was treating me at the time about freezing my eggs. And I did all the evaluation for that, but well, first of all, I wasn't abundant with financial resources. I probably could have done it, and that would have really taken care of all of my extra cash. But I was really still holding this idea that like it was in God's hands. And it wasn't like a matter of like it wasn't going to happen. I just was so believing that. And I also think that I also remember that a lot of how I related to my life around creating family unconsciously was kind of like, relating to it like the next thing and the next thing. Like, I remember when I was married, I really chose this man, and he's a wonderful human being, but in many ways, we were not really obviously, we were not a fit. And I remember that before we split up, I was already thinking about, us having children. And we ended up having challenges, and then there was a conversation, and I just really got in this moment like this was not gonna happen. And eventually we separated and then got divorced. And then from that point on, my career started to really take off. And I was very ambitious. And I don't say that judging. I think I did judge it for a long time because of what the world tells us. But I was really ambitious And I grew up in a single income house. I grew up with a single mom. I grew up with a mom who was amazing in so many ways, but very much came from the Depression era, had a lot of scarcity mindset going on. There just was never any access. I put myself through college. I put myself through grad school. I carried debt for a really long time. So all of that was really uh, it precipitated and inspired me to be really driven because I was like determined to not be in that situation, even though in many ways I was for a really long time. So I continued into my 40s. I ended up starting to date somebody, and unconsciously and then eventually consciously, I was on a mission to like, let's have a baby. And this was not a stable relationship. It did not evolve into something more serious. And it obviously was not the place to to bring in a life. But all of that, I just kept believing it was gonna happen. Kept believing it was gonna happen. And then at some point, I ended up experiencing uterine fibroids, and that went on for a really, really long time, and I didn't really understand the just really what it was. I remember when I moved back to Los Angeles because I had moved from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and then I went and got an amazing career opportunity for, a new brand that was opening. This is before the whole stock market crash of 2008, so it was an interesting time, but it was an amazing 4 years of my life. I lived in Manhattan, and then I went from there to San Diego, and then San Diego was when I was talking about freezing my eggs, and then I eventually found myself back in Los Angeles. I thought I was gonna go back to New York, but that didn't happen. I ended up in Los Angeles, and really my 40s were in and I'm still here in Los Angeles, but my 40s were really me living into this experience of believing and wanting it and longing for it for so long. So much so that I started identifying that yeah, it was a couple things that I wonder if you can relate to. Like, one of them was that I used to do, like, things like new moon circles and just ways where I would write and, intentions, and I was really connected to those. And at one point, I think I was in my mid-40s, I realized that, like, family and relationship was, like, number 8 or 9. Because I had all these intentions and these dreams and these goals for, like, what I wanted to create and what I wanted to produce and the impact I wanted to have in the world, and it's like, it's informing a lot of what I'm doing right now. But that was an interesting aha of like, "Oh, that's interesting. I say I want this, but I'm not really focusing my energy." So there's a part of me that I think was always just thinking it was just gonna happen, that fairy tale, that idea that we are all, that we're sold and we buy. At some point with the fibroids, when I came back to Los Angeles, I ended up having really good health insurance, and I found this doctor by referral that was out of Cedars, and she just, like I think I was 40 or yeah, I was 40, and she wanted me to have all these tests, and she was the one who started telling me, "You have these fibroids or, you're gonna have to address this." And I was losing a lot of blood. It became really, really challenging. And I remember one time going into her office and her saying, "I'm not sure what you don't understand about being this close and needing a blood transfusion." And I was like, "What?" It was like, I remember that moment. I can kind of see it in my mind's eye. It was like, that was like the moment I realized, oh, I've entered into a new phase. I'm no longer like immortal. Even though we don't think, oh, we're gonna live forever, some part of us doesn't know that we're not until something happens. I don't know if you've had that experience, but that was so powerful. And unfortunately, I ended up having to see a different doctor because she ended up actually retiring and moving her time. She was young, but she ended up taking care of her parents. I was really, really bummed to lose her as a doctor. She was like probably the first and only doctor I really, really enjoyed. But I ended up getting care with this nurse practitioner who was really, really experienced. And I ended up doing a uterine fibroid embolism where they go into your carotid artery here, and they actually did try to do, like, a vaginal procedure, and they put me under and everything, and I guess my sodium levels are really, really low that they aborted the whole procedure. That was a mess because I don't know if this has happened to you, but I really hadn't had this happen before. But when you go under a general anesthesia, like, coming out of that is not fun. I was just a mess for, at least a week, and my mom offered to come, and no, I just had to do it all by myself. So interesting. So then when I had the uterine fibroid embolization, they went in through this artery here, and how they explained it to me was that they cut the blood supply off to your uterus. So the other parts of your uterus figures out how to get blood a different way, but it essentially restricts the blood from the fibroids and they die. And it changed the whole, my whole period from then on. It was just kind of weird. And I remember there was a physician I was seeing. They said to me, "Well, if you want to have children right away, you don't do this. But if you're not trying to have a child, this is something you can do." Well, later on, I learned you don't do that if you still want to have a child. So all of that happened and somewhere in there, I was starting to do some research on foster to adopt, and I went to orientations and I met with people. And I remember when I left this one orientation, I was like driving home and I just bawled my eyes out. I was just so, so sad because in that moment, I just realized that the obstacles of even doing foster to adopt, I was not prepared for. I did not have the financial resources. I had no family around me whatsoever. And the only way that I could afford to do it would be to work. So how can you take in a foster child if you can't be with this child? I just couldn't. And it's in a way, as I hear myself saying this, I feel like that sounds very realistic. I also believe that was very much my mother too. Like it just wasn't practical. I had a scarcity around it. And anyways, I just remember feeling so, so devastated. And I don't really know because it was even after that that I continued to hope. And I had definitely those fetal position um, tears. But I did not have a great 40s. Like I am definitely much more settled internally. Like I have a much better situation financially. I'm not in any debt. My life is very different now. And I feel like something does happen in your like kind of 49th year, at least that's what I've heard others and coming into your 50s. Like you don't care as much about stuff. Like my self-validation is not so externally on the hook. I have a lot more, it's probably just years and time on the planet. But one thing I will tell you that healed me, and I hope that you have something like this if you're a woman that has had this experience and or you're still in that hurting. I I don't want to make this too long, so I'll share more another time, but I want to share briefly that I ended up I ended up getting a role inside of a healthcare system 3 months before the pandemic. So I'm gonna tell you the short version. I need to tell this story another time. Yeah, how that all happened, it was like an assignment. It was like an assignment. It was like a divine assignment because I was not looking for a job in a healthcare system. I had had some interaction with healthcare through, like, a boutique consulting company that I worked with from time to time, and I one of their clients, they were very much healthcare focused, and I remember I did facilitation, some executive coaching, but I never worked in healthcare. So I get this new role. At the time, it was director of organizational development, and 3 months later, COVID hits. And I don't know, I mean, working with healthcare workers was a new thing, but I'm somebody who's been studying the human experience for so long. I'm just so aware of the dynamic of people, and that's been regardless of industry. So I was able to see very quickly that in my experience, people in healthcare, they only trust their own, right? So after the pandemic hit and we were kind of all non-essential, were sent home, after about 5 weeks, I just went back to the hospital because I knew that I couldn't help them if they didn't trust me. And my job essentially became the mental health and well-being of 2,200 healthcare workers in this healthcare system in South Los Angeles that was just devastatingly impacted by COVID. It was unbelievable, that experience. I still can't believe we've just moved on. There's so much there that changed us as a humanity. But what happened one time, and this is when my mom was still alive, I was telling her this story. It's like, this is how things can happen, right? We become aware of something, and if you're somebody that if you're like me, or some version of this where, like, something you have this awareness, and then it just kinda sits with you, and it continues to kind of get more and more expanded on what does it mean, and I remember having this dialogue with my mom, and it was like reflecting. I was trying to, counsel her on, like, having that she has a 3rd act, and, I wanted to encourage her to, engage in some things that that she always wanted to, that she held herself back from. And ended up sharing the story with her about how this infectious disease doctor was like emailing me for help with the floor that she was primarily working with. And I said to my mom, like, I had this ideal scene before I got this job. And I'm like, Mom, somewhere like this is like 2021 now. And I got this job at the end of 2019. And I remember saying to my mom, I said, Mom, I recently realized that I had this ideal scene. And when I was reviewing it, every single thing, including a salary, came true. I just never said healthcare. I never said the industry because it was really about the experience I wanted to be having, the people I wanted to be working with, the work I wanted to be doing. And for some reason, like I had this, it became more aware of that and then getting this email from this infectious disease doctor. And, you know, maybe it was part of just what I saw about myself at the time was I'm not saying I looked down on myself, but I really felt like, wow, like who would have thought I would be having an infectious disease doctor coming to me for help? I just felt like, whoa, I could not have orchestrated that. And over time, I realized that a lot of what I was in deep pain about not having a child, well, I really wanted that experience. And I think I felt bad that I kept myself from that for so long because of all of my body issues. But I always thought I would be able to get pregnant and have that whole experience. Oh, that could make me cry right now. But like I always thought that was going to be part of my experience and I wanted that. And I also realized that I wanted it because I wanted to do my part. I wanted to contribute to this world, and that is what we're told and what we believe. And as women, we bear, we hold these beings into life. And on some level, there was a part of me that felt like I did not do my part. And for whatever reason, maybe it's just how I metabolized the significance of COVID and the impact on human history, but the role that I played in that healthcare system, I could not have imagined for myself. In many ways, I was like uniquely qualified because it was in a way the work I did before it, just before it as well. But I just didn't. I have a skill set, and I'm not afraid of death. And I didn't have little children at home or elderly parent. I didn't. I was uniquely designed to support these healthcare workers. And I'm not saying like I healed them or anything, but I did serve a role of support that what felt like we were in a movie often that I could never have imagined myself. And I've had other awarenesses about why I didn't end up having children, like meaning overall, like why was that not part of my destiny? I can see it from other angles. But knowing that I was able to serve in that role in that healthcare system, it healed me. It healed the part of me that felt like I had let God down, that I had let that can make me cry, that I had um, not fulfilled my promise. And it makes me emotional because I'm deeply touched by that opportunity. Wow, I didn't know that was going to happen. Um, but really, my intention in creating this video is just to speak to the woman that is having that, holding on to that pain and that grief, and that you can transcend it. I remember having so much pain wondering, will this ever go away? I mean, I remember there was a beautiful post that Serena, the tennis player made. I still have it on my Instagram feed. And I remember this, it was a photo shoot. And for some reason, it's the image that touched me the most about what I wanted for myself. And I remember just always praying, like, will I get over this? Like the ultimate heartbreak. And I did. I did. I was able to see how my role in that experience of COVID in this healthcare system that I could never have predicted for myself, it filled something. And I don't know, maybe that's just how my mind, my ego, however I computed it, but it it helped me so much. And now I can see other things too about why I didn't end up having a child that I won't get into in this video, but I just want to be that voice to you that often what we're measuring ourselves up against is an idea of what we believe we're supposed to do here, what we're supposed to be here. A lot of the ways that we feel like we haven't, measured up to our idea of success or what we wanted for our life, it's all because we're holding some idea. And I really believe, even when I can't fully register it, that there are no accidents. Everything is divine. Everything is preparing you, and you can't mess it up. And I mean, I'm sure you've had plenty of experiences where when you get distance, you see more how that made sense. So that's my wish. That's my prayer for you. And if you know what I'm talking about and you are in that space, please reach out to me. I would love to be an ear for you. And I just want to encourage you that you can heal this. You can move through it in a way that's true and not just like you're pretending to, because that can also feel like, yeah, I'm over it, but not really. No, you really, it's available. It's possible, but you have to be willing to believe that it's possible. So I hope this supported you in some way. Thank you for listening. My name is Jennifer. If you haven't yet, subscribe, join me here. I'll see you tomorrow.